Raymond. Ich darf als dritte Rednerin die Tavor ankündigen. Er hat Architektur studiert an der ETH Zürich und ist seit 2015, oder war seit 2015 bis vor kurzem dort in der Lehre tätig. Sie studiert elektroakustische Komposition, unterrichtet das auch derzeit. Sie war 2018 Teil des Teams, das den Beitrag auf der Architekturbiennale in Venedig im Schweizer Pavillon gestaltet hat und dafür den Goldenen Löwen der Biennale gewonnen hat, für den besten Pavillon. Sie spricht über das Potenzial räumlicher Disorientierung, ein Begriff, was du gerade schon aufgeworfen hast, Remo, und Architektur als Trägerin von Zeichen und Codes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm also going to present in English, if that's fine, because there's a few people that don't understand German, and I think it's nice if everyone understands. So, thank you, Jörg and Architektur, for the invitation. I was very happy to receive the invitation from Architektur to talk about our work at the Venice Biennale through the lens of queer feminist perspective, I guess. At least that's how I understood it when you asked me to talk here. And I'm happy about it because so far most architecture audiences looked at me with rather empty faces when I tried to go one step into this direction of reading the project. The visibility of these rather burning issues is not yet big enough within a broad architectural discourse. And I think this concerns both the academic field and the industry. Which once again exemplifies what kind of a lag architectural discourse today picks up certain hyper-contemporary social issues compared to other disciplines. But I didn't come here to show my discontent about the current situation within architecture discourse. That's why I will first quickly try to explain why I think architecture inhabits a key role for a lot of queer feminist issues. Since Beatrice Colomina, really, I guess, it has become inevitable to examine contemporary architecture also with regard to its media theoretical meaning and effect. And here, ideas have significantly changed our notions of interiority and exteriority, that inside is not always just where the wall begins. At the same time, since Judith Butler, gender and media are almost inseparable disciplines, it has become increasingly visible how much our perception and our knowledge, subjectivity and power of action are determined by media conditions and permeated by levels of meaning concerning gender. And by gender, I mean a subjectivation that takes place in barely consciously or, actually I have this here, yes, it's a quote, a subjectivation that takes place in barely consciously or intentionally named permanent repetitions of everyday practices, gestures, cultural codes, regimes of visibility, of naming and appeal of all genders. Architecture is without a doubt carrier of countless informations and signs. As a medium, it communicates and produces these unconscious repetitions of everyday practices and gestures, etc., which in many cases pursue a system of binary gender distribution and a heteronormative form of living together and, of course, of sexual orientation. Oh. Yeah. Floor plans of housing projects already are loaded with these kinds of informations. For example, we all know as architects that the majority of apartments built in Switzerland are 3.5, 4.5 room apartments. And if we take a look at the floor plans, these 3.5, 4.5 room apartments clearly suggest nuclear family structures with 1, 2, or 3 children as the norm condition. And when we look closer into a typical contemporary housing plan, like this one from Miroslav Sik in Leutschenbach, Zurich, we're always confronted with the same scheme. It's very simple and banal. Everybody knows it, but yet it's important to look at it, I think. There's always a large space that is considered the living room, and then there are 1, 2, or 3 smaller rooms that mostly are considered as bedrooms. And now, one of these bedrooms is not always, but in this plan, that's why I'm showing it, always, but very, very often, a tiny little bit larger than the others, which of course suggests that this would be the room where the parents, mom and dad, are supposed to sleep and reproduce. These facts are obviously not the choice of the architect, but part of the program requirements defined by the project developers. Developers or architects come across a competition and they look at the program, and so the program says they have to do it. It's not that they would, that they choose to do it. And now I'm going to show a little video that a dear friend of mine just took last week, some scenes of Zurich new housing projects, like relatively new housing project last, let's say, 7 years. I'll just go on talking while this voila. And if we look at the exterior of these housing projects, which are nowadays often large-scale housing projects like this, that produce exterior spaces with shops, playgrounds, patches of green, benches, etc., etc., sort of a hyper-controlled, normalized exterior spaces, which feels very interior when just walking in as a stranger, really. If you walk into these spaces, it's weird because you're not part of it, and you feel strange, really, even though it's actually supposed to be, or it looks like, or it's supposed to be public space. Here we start to understand how extremely controlled and regulated the type of people that are supposed to live there are, where they should be present at which time and why. Here the social norms implied by the interior plans that I just talked before are kind of flipped inside out into the public space. And this public space transforms into a sphere that reproduces these norms of the interior. And so these architectures suggest and produce very distinct social norms, and the circumstances under which these norms can exist inhabits a material culture, which is as suggestive as these floor plans and urban housing plans. And this material culture, like the actual appearance of these interiors, is very visible within contemporary housing interiors. Like here, these are basically the collection of all the interior images, unfurnished images we collected and published in our official catalog to the exhibition. And here comes our attempt to discuss this issue through the unfurnished housing interior within an exhibition that takes on this material culture and tries to work with methods that could be described as defamiliarization or disoriented or disorientation. First of all, it was important for us to understand that these interiors are not only supposed to be understood as media that carry information or ritual behavior, but almost as mass media reproduced again and again. They define the material shell of a significant part of the Swiss or population and elsewhere, and become not a topic of private matter only, but a collective and public one. Yes, and Sarah Ahmed is very present tonight in orientation towards a queer phenomenology. Sarah Ahmed writes the following: We might note here that dwelling refers not only to the process of coming to reside, or what Heidegger calls making room, but also to time. To dwell on something is to linger, or even to delay or postpone. If orientation is a matter of how we reside, or how we clear space that is familiar, then orientations also take time. Orientations allow us to take up space insofar as they take time. Even when orientations seem to be about which way we are facing in the present, they also point us towards the future. The hope of changing direction always that we do not know where some paths may take us, risking departure from the straight and narrow makes new futures possible, which might involve going astray, getting lost, or even becoming queer. Having said that, I'm going to say a few words of how we use this research to build the exhibition at the Venice Biennale, and how we inserted methods of disorientation and defamiliarization into the visitor's experience walking through the pavilion. So what we try to do in the exhibition is to make a rereading of that familiar interior and orientation possible through shifting the perspective of the visitor towards a touristic, unfamiliar view onto this interior sphere. And scaling familiar architectural elements, doors, windows, kitchens, or surfaces like floor textures and spaces of the apartment was one of the methods used to create a sort of this comfortable conflict between what we know, what we expect, and what we experience. With the simplest and most well-known working tool of all architects, scaling things up and down, we initiated a process of defamiliarization. If we take a look, and we rarely show the plan, but tonight I'm showing it, because we actually never want to talk about plans. The idea was that we talk about the materiality, the surface, what the actual expression of these interiors. So we avoided to talk about the plan, but actually it is kind of interesting to look at it, because if we take a look, we can see that there are moments within the interior pathway where we shifted angles, very banal, very simple, in order to create disorientation. At least during the opening days, most of the visitors coming to the Biennale have been there before, know the pavilions and their internal organization very well. And while introducing degree shifts other than 90 degrees, the visitors almost always were absolutely disoriented when coming out to the courtyard through the back entrance. This simple trick was proven extremely effective. So when they came, where's the pointer? Left? On the top. So this is the main entrance. And so visitors come in, and then it's kind of free. They can mainly the people will go this, because this is like a huge kitchen with one angle. Everyone wants to take a picture, and everyone walk like this, and they go back. At some point, they find themselves here, and then this angle, I think it was the main thing, because then they went out here, and they actually intuitively always thought they would be somewhere here. And so they came out and went, oh, really? So when you look at the plan, you will see that this is not a plan you would find, like this is not a realistic plan. It's a fantasy basically. We didn't want to use realistic floor plan types, because we wanted, as I said before, the exhibition entirely to be about the material identity of the interior and not about the floor plan that already has a great discourse within architecture. This led us to the conclusion to create spaces that work like adjacent corridors rather than clear suggestions of living room or bedrooms. I don't have a picture of kitchen, like here we see a kitchen. Yeah. I mean, we had like 7 kitchens. This is the big one. The kitchen, or the kitchens, are an exception in that extent, but we wanted to create a sensibility for the fact that kitchens have not only functional agency, you need to cook in the kitchen, but that this history of functionality also creates meaning as objects and as media with a specific material identity that, of course, also inhabit information and suggestive information, of course. Yeah, that's that. Anyway, so that was very quick and close. To close my input, I want to read out my favorite little comment on the exhibition by Oliver Wainwright. And you can also, yes. He wrote in 2018, after the opening in The Guardian, he wrote, "This year's standout genius is to be found in the Swiss Pavilion, where a group of young architects has concocted a surreal stage set of ubiquitous show home, creating a labyrinthine sequence of shifts in scale. There are little Putin doors leading into Brobdinian, it's hard to say that word, kitchens, corridors that taper to nothing, and ceilings that rise and plunge from room to room, including inducing agora and claustrophobia by turn. Decorated with a generic palette of plasterboard walls, skirting boards, wooden floors, and off-the-shelf fittings, it has an eerie clinical neutrality. It feels like a place where estate agents might go to die, trapped in an endless purgatory of oversized kitchens, minute bedrooms, and corridors to nowhere. The Biennale jury rarely picks that's my favorite, but this year Switzerland gratefully on the golden line. Thank you for listening.